President Trump and Kim Jong-un arrived in Singapore Sunday ahead of their historic summit. Mr. Trump will be the first sitting U.S. president to meet with a North Korean leader. The president said the meeting is, quote, a one-time shot to make North Korea great. Joining us now from San Francisco via Skype is Markos Kounalakis. He is a foreign affairs columnist for McClatchy News. All right, Markos, with everything that has happened in the G7 meetings in Canada, will the headlines work, you think, in President Trump's favor with Kim Jong-un, or will his split with allies weaken his international support for any possible deal?
Elaine, I don't think that G7 meetings will make much difference one way or the other. I think that what happened at the G7 was reflective of what President Trump's perspective is on the world. He sees the G7 as a bunch of leaderless, weak, in fact, nations that are taking advantage of the United States. This is his perspective, and that it really doesn't make a much difference because they don't have a unified voice for the most part to bring any pressure into the negotiations or any sort of unified approach from his perspective. So I don't think what happened at G7 will affect the negotiations much. What matters to President Trump, I think, is he sees the world as made up of three great powers: the United States, of course, Russia, and China. He feels that the leaders of those countries can speak with authority and with power to what it is that he wants to deal with, and not international, multinational organizations, which are somewhat democratic.
Well, President Trump spoke highly of Kim Jong-un at the G7 meeting the other day. Let's listen to that.
I really believe that he's going to do something very positive for his people, for himself, his family. He's got an opportunity the likes of which I think almost, if you look into history, very few people have ever had. He can take that nation with those great people and truly make it great. So it's a one-time shot, and I think it's going to work out very well. And that's why I feel positive, because it makes so much sense.
Well, President Trump and Kim Jong-un have had a rocky relationship, at least when it comes to rhetoric. How do you see that past playing a role in their negotiations?
I think all of that past is a part of the negotiation. It's part of how you set it up. At least the president has felt it important that he be able to move Kim Jong-un and South Korea as well to a position where they can actually have a negotiation face-to-face, where the negotiating teams, whether it's Secretary Pompeo or others who are part of the White House team, can actually enter into a room and be able to have a negotiation. A face-to-face negotiation. But the whole language that's been around this, the entire pressure campaign that is significant from the military in the Northeast Asian area, in the Korean Peninsula, has all been a part of the so-called negotiation. Now what we're seeing is the manifestation of the final part of this play, if you will, this international theatrical performance that leads to the face-to-face meeting. And clearly what you heard at G7 is that the president is anticipating that there's enough groundwork that's been laid for him to come out with some level of victory and a pretty good-looking first day at that summit.
Well, Russia has also been involved in this North Korea summit. President Putin weighed in, saying North Korea would need absolute security guarantees about its plans for the Korean Peninsula if the North gave up its weapons. What does Russia have at stake in this summit, and what role has it been playing behind the scenes?
Elaine, Russia, of course, shares a border with North Korea. They're concerned, should things fall apart in North Korea, that refugees could certainly stream in to Russian territory. So they have a real stake in the game. Having said that, there's also a geopolitical reason why Russia wants to be a part of this. They are, as President Trump, I think, acknowledges and, in fact, reinforces, a great nation and one of the three big players in his perspective of the world. And so the same way that Putin has asserted himself successfully into the Middle East, particularly in Syria, he wants to assert himself and insert himself into the negotiations with North Korea, and there is a nexus for that. So let me just say one more thing about Russia. Russia is the only nation that has taken nuclear weapons from previously nuclear beweaponed nations and helped dismantle and move nuclear weapons into its own territory. I speak of Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. At the end of the Soviet Union, Russia was key in terms of being able to help dismantle those weapons and being able to provide the security guarantees. Now, I have no doubt that he would like for those weapons that are being dismantled in North Korea perhaps to find their way to Russia. I don't think President Trump is ready to use China to take over the previous nuclear weapons that would be existing in North Korea or any deal. So Russia has a lot at stake. It has a lot to offer, and clearly President Trump feels no compunction about dealing with Russia.
It's really interesting when you mention the history there. Meanwhile, in the U.S., a new poll from Quinnipiac University shows 72% of Americans approve of this summit, but they also do not believe North Korea will be giving up its weapons. Markos, what do these numbers tell us about Americans' confidence in the president's foreign policy?
Elaine, I don't know if it's confidence in the president's abilities or in the likelihood that a nation that has nuclear weapons is willing to give them up. I think Americans understand viscerally that if you've got something that is that important and is guaranteeing your security, that it's going to be very difficult to give it up. So I think Americans are being realistic. What we're not taking into account in this particular poll is over what amount of time is Kim Jong-un perhaps willing to give up these nuclear weapons? And all the indications are that we're not looking at something immediate. What President Trump might be able to succeed at doing in the short term is getting rid of the missiles that make North Korea a national security threat to America. In other words, the long-range missiles, and then deal in a longer-term fashion with the denuclearization, however that's defined, of the Korean Peninsula.
All right, Markos Kounalakis. Thank you so much, Markos.
Thank you.